His world spun, the smell of burnt sugar and his own blood filling his nose. He'd wanted to teach the quiet girl a lesson. Now, he was the one learning about the monster hiding behind the counter. The Daily Grind coffee shop sat nestled in a brickfront building in Port Blossom, a town that lived and breathed by the rhythm of the nearby naval base. The air, a constant blend of salt spray from the harbor and the rich, dark scent of roasting beans, was the first thing Elara Vance catalogued every morning. At precisely 5:47 hours, she would turn the key in the lock, her movements economical, honed by a discipline that had nothing to do with customer service. To the regulars, Elara, the quiet 30-year-old owner with the loose, honey-brown bun and weary blue eyes, was a creature of comforting, if slightly odd, habit. They saw a woman who operated her gleaming espresso machine with the intensity of a bomb disposal expert. She didn't just scoop coffee, she weighed it on a digital scale to exactly 23.0 grams, her brow furrowed in concentration. She didn't just steam milk, she monitored its temperature with a digital thermometer, pulling it away at the precise moment it reached 65 degrees Celsius. This laboratory-grade precision was dismissed by most as a harmless quirk, perhaps the lingering effect of some past trauma that left her needing absolute control over her small corner of the world. They saw the loose flannel shirts and practical work pants she always wore, sleeves often rolled just enough to obscure her forearms. They saw how she startled at the sharp clang of a drop tray or the backfire of a truck outside. Poor thing, the mayor's wife, Penelope Richardson, would whisper to her circle, clutching her designer bag. Probably a bad breakup. Or maybe family trouble. You can tell she's been through something. They saw a fragile thing, a woman who had built a fortress of routine to keep the world at bay. What they didn't see was the constant, silent threat assessment. They didn't notice that Elara never stood with her back to the door, that her position behind the counter gave her a clear line of sight to both the entrance and the back exit. They didn't realize her arrangement of cleaning supplies, a heavy-duty spray bottle here, a solid metal scoop there, wasn't for convenience, but for accessibility. They were potential improvised weapons, placed within a fraction of a second's reach. They saw a quiet barista, they didn't see a sentinel. But in the corner booth, an old man saw something more. Silas Sarge Kowalski, a Marine veteran with a chest full of quiet pride and hands gnarled by 70 years of hard living, nursed his black coffee every morning. He wasn't watching the other customers, he was watching Elara. He saw past the gentle facade. He saw the way her eyes didn't just see people, but scanned them, cataloging height, weight, dominant hand, and potential threats in the time it took them to read the menu. More than that, he saw the ritual. When a particularly loud group of sailors came in, their boisterous energy filling the space, Silas noticed Elara's right thumb move to her left wrist. He watched, fascinated, as her thumb pressed down in a slow, deliberate sequence on 3 specific points just below her palm. It wasn't a nervous tick. It was a procedure. A calming technique he hadn't seen since his own advanced training days, a pressure point sequence taught to special operators to control heart rate and adrenaline spikes under extreme duress. Who was this woman? The whispers among the customers painted a picture of feminine fragility. But Silas, who had seen true strength and true fragility in the crucible of combat, knew they were two very different things. The way she moved, with a fluid economy that wasted no energy, reminded him of the silent, lethal grace of the reconnaissance teams he'd supported decades ago. He saw a ghost wearing a barista's apron, and the dissonance was both fascinating and deeply unsettling. Elara felt his eyes on her sometimes, a focused, analytical gaze so different from the pitying or curious glances of the others. She recognized the look. It was the look of a fellow professional, someone who knew the language of vigilance. It put her on edge, but it was a familiar edge, a whetstone against which her senses had been sharpened for years. For now, he was just a customer, a quiet old man in a corner. He was a known variable in a world of unpredictable threats, and so she filed him away, maintaining her carefully constructed cover. She was Elara Vance, purveyor of fine coffee, a woman unremarkable and easily forgotten. It was a role she had perfected for survival, because the person she used to be was someone the world was never supposed to remember. The tranquility of the mid-morning lull was shattered not by a sound, but by a vibration. It started as a low thrumming in the soles of Alara's feet, growing steadily into a ground-shaking roar that rattled the ceramic mugs on their hooks. It was the sound of unrestrained power, a mechanical chorus of contempt for the quiet order of the world. Through the large front window, 6 motorcycles materialized, their chrome glinting menacingly in the sun. They were custom Harleys, loud and arrogant, and they pulled into the parking spaces with a practiced aggression, taking up more room than necessary. The riders dismounted in a wave of worn leather and denim. They were the Iron Horsemen, a local biker crew whose reputation was built on casual intimidation and a shared philosophy that respect was something to be taken, not earned. Their leader, a mountain of a man named Rex, the Rhino, Corbin, swung his leg over his bike. His neck, thick as a tree trunk, was adorned with a tattoo of a charging rhinoceros. He pointed a beefy finger at the coffee shop, a smirk spreading across his bearded face as he spoke to his men. Their laughter was a harsh, guttural sound that seemed to punch through the glass. The chime above the door was a ridiculously cheerful sound for the menace that poured in after it. The 6 men filled the space, their physical bulk and aggressive energy sucking the air out of the room. They brought with them the smell of cheap cigars, stale sweat, and the damp, earthy scent of rain-soaked leather. Every conversation in the daily grind died in an instant. Penelope Richardson instinctively pulled her purse closer. The 2 college students in the corner stopped typing and stared, wide-eyed. Even Silas Kowalski sat up a little straighter, his hand resting on the gnarled head of his cane. Rex swaggered to the counter, his crew fanning out behind him in a loose, predatory formation. A man with a jagged scar bisecting his eyebrow, known only as Blade, flanked him to the right. On the left, a wiry, twitchy man called Viper scanned the room with unsettling intensity. At the back, blocking the doorway, stood the Griswold twins, 2 identical, silent brutes who moved with a chilling synchronicity. Alara finished wiping a clean spot on the counter, her movements betraying nothing. She finally looked up, her calm blue eyes meeting Rex's. "Well, look what we have here," Rex boomed, his voice deliberately loud, playing to the captive audience. "A little porcelain doll running a coffee shop. How cute." His men chortled on cue. "I bet she makes those little pictures in the foam," Blade sneered, pointing at the menu board. "That's some real sissy stuff, ain't it?" "We should make this our new clubhouse," Viper added, running a dirty finger along the polished countertop. "Be nice to have a little maid to clean up after us." The insults were crude, designed to provoke, to get a reaction she could be punished for. Alara's training screamed at her. "Assess, don't engage. De-escalate. Control the environment." "What can I get for you?" she asked, her voice perfectly level, professional, and devoid of the fear they expected. Her composure seemed to irritate Rex more than any outburst would have. He leaned forward, invading her personal space, his foul breath washing over her. 6 black coffees, he ordered. "And make 'em strong. Not like that flavored water you probably serve the yuppies." He paused, looking her up and down with a lecherous grin. "And a smile, sweetheart. It won't kill you to look happy to serve real men." The systematic degradation was a classic intimidation tactic, textbook in its execution. Isolate the target. Humiliate them publicly. Establish dominance through verbal and physical encroachment. Alara felt her heart rate begin to climb, a familiar drumbeat against her ribs. Her thumb twitched, wanting to find the pressure points on her other wrist, but she held it still. Showing a crack, any crack, would only invite more pressure. She turned with methodical grace to begin preparing their order, her body a mask of serene compliance. But beneath the surface, a different part of her was waking up, a cold, patient predator that had been dormant for 3 long years. It began to count, to calculate, to prepare. Alara moved with the unhurried precision that was her shield. She measured 6 scoops of dark roast, the metallic scrape of the spoon against the tin the only sound she made. The bikers grew restless with her silence, their taunts escalating in volume and vulgarity. "Hey, you deaf!" Rex barked, slamming a meaty fist on the counter. The sugar shakers jumped. "Or just too dumb to talk." "Maybe she's scared of us," Viper hissed, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "Look at her, boys. I think she's about to cry." The other customers shifted uncomfortably, their gazes darting between the floor, their phones, and the unfolding drama. It was the classic bystander effect, a room full of people, yet no one moved, each individual paralyzed by the collective inaction and the palpable threat the bikers posed. They were spectators at a public shaming, their silence a form of passive consent. Elara focused on the rhythmic hiss of the espresso machine, using the sound to anchor herself, to wall off the rising tide of insults. They are just noise. Inconsequential data. Do not react to the stimulus. That's when a new voice cut through the tension, calm and resonant with an authority that age had not diminished. "Miss, excuse me." All eyes turned to the corner booth. Silas Sarge Kowalski was standing, his posture straight, his gaze fixed on Elara. Rex and his crew turned, annoyed by the interruption. "Sit down, old man," Blade grunted. "This ain't your business." Silas ignored him completely. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, were locked on Elara's hands as she worked. "I was just noticing the way you wiped down that counter," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "You move in straight, overlapping lines. Each new pass covers exactly 1/3 of the previous one. It's a specific pattern." Elara froze for a fraction of a second, a bag of coffee beans halfway to the grinder. The bikers exchanged confused glances. What was this old fool talking about? Silas took a slow step forward, his cane tapping a steady rhythm on the floor. "It reminds me of something I was taught a long, long time ago. A standard operating procedure for clearing a minefield. You use the same overlapping pattern to ensure no inch of ground is left unchecked." He paused, his eyes boring into hers. "You serve in any particular branch, miss?" The question hung in the air, charged with unspoken meaning. It wasn't a casual inquiry, it was a challenge. A password thrown into the dark, waiting for the correct response. Elara's mind raced. He knows. He can't know, but he does. The carefully constructed walls of her cover story began to crack. She could see the flicker of recognition in his eyes, the look of a man who had seen the ghost in the machine. A part of her, a long-buried part that craved the camaraderie of shared experience, felt a flash of relief. But it was immediately extinguished by the cold wave of alarm. "Exposure is death." "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice a little too tight. Rex, tired of the bizarre interruption, turned his attention back to her. "Enough of this weirdness. Where are our coffees?" Elara placed the bag of beans down with deliberate care. She turned her head slowly, her gaze sweeping over the 6 men. The fear was gone from her eyes, replaced by something else. A flat, chillingly calm assessment. As she spoke, she casually moved a stainless steel cleaning pitcher, filled with scalding water for sanitizing, to the edge of the counter, within easy reach. "You have 60 seconds, she said, her voice quiet but clear as a bell. The sheer audacity of the statement broke the tension with a wave of derisive laughter. Rex threw his head back and roared. The Griswold twins actually cracked smiles. "Did you hear that?" Tank bellowed, wiping a tear of mirth from his eye. "The little porcelain doll just threatened us." 60 seconds before what? "You gonna splash some latte art on us?" But Silas Kowalski wasn't laughing. He was watching Elara's stance, the subtle shift of her weight to the balls of her feet, the way her hands were now held loosely at her sides, ready. He recognized the posture of a fighter about to engage. "Boys," Silas said, his voice low and urgent. "I'd strongly suggest you listen to the lady." His warning was the final spark. Enraged by her defiance, Humiliated by the old man's interference, and fueled by the laughter of his crew, Rex made the last mistake of his life. He reached across the counter, his hand a blur of motion, and clamped down on Alara's left wrist. "I'm tired of your games, little girl. You're gonna learn some." His words died in his throat. The moment his skin made contact with hers, he triggered a switch. It wasn't a decision. It was a reflex, forged in fire and pain, a response buried deeper than thought. Alara's entire being transformed in the space between one heartbeat and the next. The change was instantaneous and terrifying. The soft, weary lines of Alara's face hardened into a mask of cold fury. Her spine, which had been held with a hint of a defensive slump, snapped ramrod straight. Her center of gravity dropped as her feet shifted into a perfect combat stance. The blue eyes that had seemed so gentle moments before became chips of ice, scanning Rex and his men not as people, but as targets, assessing angles, weaknesses, and threats with terrifying speed. Silas Kowalski sucked in a sharp breath, his heart pounding with a sudden, shocking realization. "My God," he whispered, the name coming to him from the hushed, classified briefings of a forgotten war. Ghost 23. The name hit the room like a concussive blast. It meant nothing to the bikers or the other customers, but it landed on Alara like a physical blow. Rex's grip on her wrist faltered, his bravado evaporating in the face of her transformation and the old man's cryptic words. "What the hell is a Ghost 23, he stammered. Alara's eyes locked on Silas. For the first time in 3 years, the mask didn't just slip, it shattered. The soldier she had buried looked out, raw and exposed. "That name is classified," she said, her voice a low, dangerous growl that was utterly alien to the woman they thought they knew. "So was the mission in Syria, petty officer," Silas replied, his voice thick with emotion. "But some stories need to be told." The word Syria hung in the air. The pieces were beginning to click into place, forming a picture far more complex and deadly than a simple coffee shop dispute. "That's bull," one of the Griswold twins grunted from the doorway. "Women can't be Navy SEALs." "Officially, we didn't exist," Alara said, her gaze turning back to the bikers, cold and unforgiving. She flexed her wrist, and Rex felt a surge of power that was utterly disproportionate to her size. With a sharp, practiced twist, she broke his grip. In the same fluid motion, her other hand shot out, grabbing the pitcher of scalding water. Viper, seeing the move, lunged forward. It was a fatal error. Alara moved with blinding speed. She sidestepped his clumsy rush, her leg sweeping out and hooking his ankle. As he tumbled forward, she brought the base of the heavy steel pitcher down hard on the back of his neck. He collapsed without a sound, a puppet with its strings cut. One down. Blade pulled a knife, its edge gleaming. He was more cautious, circling to her left. Alara didn't wait. She kicked a bar stool into his path, breaking his rhythm, and then she was on him. Her left hand shot out, deflecting his knife arm, while her right delivered 3 lightning-fast strikes to his throat, collarbone, and solar plexus. He gasped, choking, the knife clattering to the floor as he staggered back and fell. 2 down. The Griswold twins charged together from the doorway, a coordinated assault. It was the wrong tactic. Alara met their momentum, using it against them. She ducked under the first twin's wild swing, driving her elbow into his ribs with a sickening crunch. As he doubled over, she spun, using his body as a shield against his brother, and drove the heel of her boot into the second twin's knee. The joint buckled with an audible pop. 4 down. Rex and the remaining biker stared, their faces a mixture of terror and disbelief. This wasn't a fight, it was a systematic dismantling. The program was designated Ghost Unit. Alara's voice cut through the stunned silence as she advanced on them. 12 female operatives, integrated into SEAL Team 6 for missions where a male presence was a liability. We were ghosts. Untraceable. Undeniable. Her story tumbled out, a torrent of suppressed trauma. Syria, 2021. A simple recon mission. 12 of us sent in. But our intel was bad. It wasn't a weapons cache. It was a trap. Her eyes grew distant, seeing not the coffee shop but the dusty, blood-soaked streets of a forgotten town. 200 enemy fighters waiting for us. Someone sold us out. Our position, our timeline, our exfil route. She stalked toward Rex, who was backing away, tripping over a fallen chair. The first IED took out our comms. The second split the team. I watched my friends, my sisters, get cut down. I only survived because I was buried under 2 of their bodies, covered in their blood, pretending to be dead. She held up her left arm, the sleeve of her flannel shirt now torn, revealing 3 long, parallel scars that ran from wrist to elbow. This shrapnel. It's a souvenir from the IED that killed my team leader. I lay there for 6 hours, listening to them celebrate over the bodies of my 11 teammates before I was rescued. The final biker, his face pale, made a desperate run for the door. Elara was faster. She vaulted the counter, landed silently, and took him down with a chokehold that rendered him unconscious in seconds. 5 down. Now, it was just her and Rex. He was on the floor, scrambling backward, his face a mask of pure terror. We didn't know," he whimpered. "You didn't ask," she replied, her voice breaking with the weight of it all. "You saw someone you thought was weak, and you decided to hurt her. That's all you needed to know." She stood over him, not as a barista, but as the sole survivor of a massacre, a ghost who had finally come home to haunt the living. Just as Rex was about to pass out from sheer terror, the sleek, imposing form of a black Chevrolet Suburban glided to a stop outside the front window. Its tinted windows reflected the chaos within the coffee shop, a silent, governmental monolith observing the aftermath. Elara's head snapped up, her combat focus immediately shifting from the downed bikers to the new, more significant threat. Her training made her hyper-aware of surveillance, and this vehicle screamed federal authority. "Silas," she said, her voice low and urgent, never taking her eyes off the Suburban. "Get everyone out the back. Now." But Silas was already staring at the vehicle, his old soldier's instincts screaming. "Too late for that, petty officer," he murmured. The passenger door opened, and a man in an impeccably tailored suit stepped out. He was tall, with silver hair and the easy, confident bearing of a man accustomed to power. The eagle pin on his lapel identified him as a high-ranking official. He moved toward the coffee shop entrance, flanked by 2 other men in suits whose alert, professional posture marked them as federal agents. Silas's breath hitched. "I know him," he whispered, a look of dawning horror on his face. "That's Marcus Thorne. Director of the DID. He briefed my unit before a deployment once. He was coordinating intelligence with SEAL teams in the Syrian theater." Elara's body went rigid, a new, colder fury eclipsing the adrenaline of the fight. "He wasn't just coordinating, Silas," she said, her voice laced with venom. "He was selling. $40,000 per head. Our position, our timeline, our extraction routes. He sold out 11 of America's finest warriors so he could pay off his gambling debts." The revelation landed with the force of a physical blow. The conflict had just escalated from a street brawl to an act of high treason. Thorne entered the coffee shop, his polished shoes crunching softly on broken ceramic. He surveyed the scene, the unconscious bikers, the terrified customers, the armed ghost standing in the middle of it all, and his face settled into a mask of practiced concern. "Petty Officer Vance," he began, his voice smooth as silk. "Or is it Miss Williams now? It seems you're having some trouble. We're here to help." "Hello, Marcus," Elara said, her voice cutting through his facade. "It's been a while. Last time I saw you, you were sending me and my team to die." Thorne's smile didn't falter, but his eyes hardened. "Clearly, your PTSD is more severe than we thought," he said, playing to the room. "Traumatic events can cause delusions. Paranoia. This was his strategy: discredit the witness. Paint her as a hysterical, broken soldier. But he hadn't counted on the other people in the room. Penelope Richardson, who had been hiding behind a large potted plant, had her phone out. She was live streaming. Hero or hypocrite, her on-screen caption read. Veteran accuses high-ranking official of treason. The viewer count was already climbing into the thousands. And then something remarkable happened. Rex, the rhino, who was still on the floor, pushed himself up. He looked from Alara's face, etched with righteous fury, to Thorne's, slick with deceit. He got to his feet, and with a resolve that surprised everyone, including himself, he moved to stand between Alara and Thorne's agents. "Hey, suit," Rex growled, his voice a low rumble. "Nobody's touching her, till we figure out what the hell is going on." The other bikers, groaning as they stirred into consciousness, saw their leaders stand and slowly, painfully, got to their feet, forming a ragged, protective wall around Alara. The predators had become guardians. "You have no proof," Thorne hissed at Alara, his composure finally cracking. "It's the word of a traumatized, unstable operative against a decorated director of national intelligence." "Proof is a funny thing, Marcus," Alara said. She reached behind the counter, her hand finding a small, hidden magnetic box. She pulled it free and opened it. Inside was a single thumb drive. On it, tied with a piece of paracord, was a small, hand-carved wooden bird, a keepsake that had belonged to Jameson, her team's youngest member. She held it up for everyone to see. "False memories don't come with encrypted communication logs between you and a foreign asset. They don't come with offshore bank records detailing every single blood-soaked transfer. And they don't come with time-stamped satellite data showing you accessing the mission file and transmitting it 60 minutes before my team walked into a kill box." She took a step forward. "I've spent 3 years hunting you from the shadows, you son of a bitch. 3 years gathering the evidence to burn your world to the ground. Welcome to the reckoning." The standoff was broken by the squeal of tires and the arrival of more official vehicles, these ones clearly marked with the bold letters, FBI. Alerted by the viral live stream and the gravity of the on-air accusations, a legitimate federal task force swarmed the scene, their professionalism making Thorne's personal agents look like amateurs. Thorne's face went ashen as a senior FBI agent took the thumb drive from Alara, handling it with the care reserved for critical evidence. His protests of national security and classified information were ignored. His carefully constructed world of power and deceit was crumbling in real time, broadcast live to a horrified nation. The ghost he had tried to create had materialized to ensure his own burial. As he was led away in handcuffs, still sputtering denials, the last thing he saw was Alara's cold, unwavering stare. In the aftermath, a profound quiet settled over the daily grind. The adrenaline faded, leaving behind the bone-deep exhaustion of a war finally ended. Rex Corbin approached Alara hesitantly, his massive frame seeming to shrink under the weight of his shame. "Ma'am." "Petty officer," he stammered, his voice thick with a remorse that was shockingly genuine. "There are no words. What we did, there's no excuse. We were wrong. Horribly wrong." Alara looked at him, and for the first time, she saw not a monster, but a man who had made a terrible mistake and now understood its magnitude. "No, you didn't know," she said, her voice soft but firm. "But you didn't care to know. You saw what you wanted to see. That's the difference between a bully and a protector." "How can we make it right?" another biker asked, his head bowed. Alara's gaze drifted past them, through the window, toward the distant green lawns of the Naval Base Cemetery. "You want to make it right?" she said. "Start by learning what real sacrifice looks like. Start a new crew. Call yourselves the Iron Escorts or something. Use those bikes to give rides to veterans who can't get to their hospital appointments. Protect the people who protected you. Earn your respect instead of trying to steal it." The bikers looked at one another, a new, unfamiliar sense of purpose dawning in their eyes. They filed out of the coffee shop, their movements subdued, their usual swagger replaced by a somber humility. The roar of their engines as they departed was not a sound of intimidation, but the sound of a promise. 6 months later, the daily grind was transformed. It was still a coffee shop, but it was also something more. On the wall behind the counter, where a generic painting once hung, there was now a simple, framed photograph of 12 smiling women in desert fatigues, arms slung around each other under a harsh, foreign sun. The corner booth, once Silas's domain, was now the veteran's corner, with a perpetually full pot of free coffee and a stack of pamphlets for mental health and support services. Ilara still moved with precision, but her vigilance had a new focus. She no longer scanned for threats, she scanned for pain. She looked for the 1,000-yard stares, the restless hands, the invisible wounds that she knew so well. One morning, a young man in a freshly issued navy hoodie walked in, his shoulders slumped, his eyes haunted. Ilara watched him hesitate by the door, lost and adrift. She poured a coffee into a ceramic mug, walked around the counter, and set it on the table in the veteran's corner. "Welcome home," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of shared understanding. "Have a seat. Let's talk." The young sailor looked up, and in her calm, steady gaze, he saw not a barista, but a lighthouse. A beacon for those lost in the storm. Ilara Vance, Ghost 23, had spent years hiding from the world, a survivor haunted by the dead. But in the quiet hum of her coffee shop, surrounded by the living who needed her, she had finally found a new mission. She was no longer just surviving. She was healing. And in healing others, she was finally, truly, healing herself. Ilara's story is a powerful reminder that heroes are all around us, often hidden in plain sight, fighting battles we know nothing about. Have you ever encountered someone who was far more than they appeared to be? Share your story in the comments below, and please, always comment with respect. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more tales of the extraordinary people who walk among us every day.